A 4-year-old orphan boy is offered dirty water by a restaurant owner who says he deserves to be thirsty. But a millionaire witnessed it all and did something that shocked everyone. Please comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scorching morning sun beat down on the dusty streets of the big city as the 4-year-old orphan boy staggered along the cracked sidewalks, his frail body trembling with thirst. His tattered clothes clung to his parched skin, and his chapped lips barely managed to move as he tried to swallow the little saliva that remained in his mouth. Malnutrition had transformed the child into a fragile shadow, looking like someone 2 years younger, his sunken eyes reflecting a suffering that no child should know. Each step was a battle against the weakness that took over his skinny legs. The boy clung to the walls of the buildings to keep from falling, leaving small dirt marks in his desperate attempt to stay upright. He hadn't had clean water in 3 days, and the thirst had become a constant torture that consumed every thought, every movement, every gasping breath that escaped his small chest. The aroma of hot food coming from a fancy restaurant in the city's shopping district made his empty stomach clench violently. The establishment shone with clean windows and sophisticated decor, a stark contrast to the misery walking along the sidewalk. The boy hesitated for a few minutes at the entrance, watching the well-dressed customers who came and went, before gathering the courage to approach the door. His trembling little hands pushed open the glass door, and the icy air conditioning hit him like a slap, making him shiver even more. The owner of the restaurant, a burly man of about 40, with a prominent belly and a face red with constant irritation, looked at the child with utter disgust. His small, cruel eyes scanned the boy's frail body, registering every detail of the poverty that stood before him. "Please, sir," the boy murmured in a hoarse voice, "just a little water. I'm very thirsty." The owner snorted loudly, attracting the attention of some customers who stopped eating to watch the scene. His face twisted into an expression of contempt as he approached the child, his heavy footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. "Get out of here, kid. This isn't a place for dirty beggars like you. You're scaring away my customers." The shouts echoed through the restaurant, causing several people to lower their heads in embarrassment. The boy took a few steps back, but the desperate thirst was stronger than the fear. Tears began to roll down his dirty little face as he mustered the strength to plead once more. "Please, sir, just a small glass of water. I promise I'll leave after." The child's persistence further enraged the man, who felt his pride wounded in front of the customers. He walked to the service area with violent strides, grabbed a bucket of dirty water that was being used to clean the floor, filled a disposable plastic cup with the murky liquid, and returned to where the boy was waiting. "You want water? Then take it," he shouted, throwing the cup forcefully on the ground right in front of the child's bare feet. The dirty water spread across the floor, mixing with the dust and creating a small, muddy puddle. "That's what people like you deserve. Now get out of my sight before I call security." Near the window, a woman in her 30s watched the whole scene with growing indignation. Her stunning beauty drew attention even in that tense moment. Long, silky hair framed a face with delicate features, while her elegant clothes and understated jewelry revealed a privileged financial condition. But it was the glint of revolt in her dark eyes that really stood out at that moment. The millionaire had built her empire through years of hard work, investing smartly in the stock market and multiplying her wealth with ironclad determination. Her dollar fortune allowed for a life of luxury, but had also awakened in her a keen sense of social justice. Seeing that child being humiliated in that way made something explode inside her chest. Without hesitation, she stood up from the table, her high heels clicking authoritatively against the floor as she walked towards the restaurant owner. Her upright posture and firm gaze made several customers stop talking to watch what was about to happen. "How dare you treat a child like that? Her voice cut through the air like a blade, cold and controlled, but loaded with a fury that made the man take a step back. What kind of person denies water to a thirsty child? The owner, initially intimidated by the woman's imposing presence, soon regained his arrogance upon noticing her expensive clothes. A malicious smile formed on his thick lips as he crossed his arms over his broad chest. "Oh, another one of those rich do-gooders. Why don't you take the kid to your mansion then, since you're so worried?" His voice dripped with sarcasm and contempt. "People like you show up here pretending to be saints, but never get your own hands dirty." The man's response only intensified the businesswoman's determination. She opened her Italian leather bag, took out a thick wad of bills, and placed it on the counter with enough force to make the noise echo through the silent restaurant. "How much does all the food you have in stock today cost?" The question caught the owner completely off guard. He blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard, as he watched the impressive amount of money in front of him. All the stock?" he stammered, his arrogance beginning to give way to confusion. "Every sandwich, every prepared dish, every dessert, every drink, everything." The woman spoke with the authority of someone who was used to closing million-dollar deals. "I want to buy everything now." The man made quick calculations in his head, his eyes gleaming with greed as he realized the unexpected profit he could make that day. Without fully understanding the woman's intentions, he quickly accepted the proposal, almost tripping over his own words in his haste to finalize the sale. A few minutes later, the millionaire was on the street, organizing an impromptu food distribution. The orphan boy was the first to receive a hot plate and a glass of clean water, his little eyes filling with tears of gratitude as he drank large gulps of the crystal-clear water. Dozens of other needy people quickly gathered around, forming an orderly line to receive the free food. Inside the empty restaurant, the owner watched through the window with growing concern. His initial mockery had turned into panic as he realized that he had nothing left to sell for the rest of the day, and the customers who arrived left when they discovered that the establishment was out of stock. But the worst was yet to come, as that determined woman did not intend to stop there. In the following days, the businesswoman couldn't get the image of that frail boy desperately drinking water out of her mind. Her routine of meetings and investments was interrupted by a constant restlessness that made her question how she could help more effectively. During her morning walks through the commercial area, she began to discreetly observe the behavior of the restaurant owner, discovering that the episode had not been an isolated case. Hidden behind parked cars or pretending to read newspapers at nearby stands, the millionaire witnessed shocking scenes. The man violently expelled street vendors who approached his establishment, shouted at employees for insignificant reasons, and treated customers with simpler appearances with visible contempt. His cruelty seemed to be a deep trait of his personality, a characteristic that manifested itself whenever he felt superior to someone. In one of those observations, she saw the owner humiliate a young employee in front of other employees, yelling that she was incompetent and threatening to deduct the value of a broken dish from her already meager salary. The girl cried silently as she cleaned up the shards, her shoulders trembling with humiliation and fear of losing the job that supported her family. Determined to investigate more deeply, the businesswoman began to frequent other establishments in the area, chatting casually with neighboring merchants. She discovered that the questionable practices of the restaurant had been known for years. Employees worked excessive shifts without receiving adequate overtime. The sanitary conditions of the kitchen left much to be desired, and several complaints had already been made to the competent authorities, but mysteriously never resulted in effective inspections. An elderly mechanic who worked at the workshop next door revealed between sips of bitter coffee that the restaurant owner had pull at City Hall, always managing to escape fines and inspections through political favors and well-placed bribes. Local corruption protected his dirty business, allowing him to continue exploiting employees and disregarding basic hygiene and safety standards. Parallel to these disturbing discoveries, the millionaire had begun to look for the orphan boy she had helped. Her walks through the streets became a systematic search, scouring alleys, squares, and abandoned areas where street children usually took refuge. During 3 weeks of searching, she faced the brutal reality of the city's invisible population. Dozens of people living in the shadows, surviving on leftovers, and the occasional kindness of strangers. Finally, on a stifling afternoon, she found the boy hidden behind a pile of old tires in the back of a mechanic shop. He had built a small shelter with pieces of cardboard and torn tarpaulins, creating a tiny corner that he called home. His appearance was even more debilitated than on the day of the restaurant, and a dry, persistent cough shook his frail body every few minutes. When the woman approached, the boy cowered against the wall, his eyes showing the deep fear of someone who had learned to distrust all adults. His experiences on the streets had been a succession of disappointments, broken promises, and moments of cruelty that shaped his perception of the world as a hostile and dangerous place. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said softly, crouching down to be at the child's eye level. "Remember me? I'm the woman from the restaurant who gave you food that day." Gradual recognition lit up the boy's dirty little face, but distrust remained. He had seen many adults change their behavior quickly, going from gentle to violent in a matter of seconds. His life experience, despite his young age, had taught him that human kindness was rare and often temporary. During the hesitant conversations that followed, the businesswoman discovered the child's devastating story. 2 years earlier, he lived with an elderly woman who cared for several abandoned children in a simple house on the outskirts of town. A traffic accident had taken the life of his protector, and the local authorities simply scattered the children across different overcrowded institutions where he suffered abuse and neglect. Fleeing these places of supposed care, the boy had chosen the streets as a lesser evil. At least there he knew exactly what dangers to face, unlike in the shelters where violence came disguised as protection and care. His survival depended on a daily routine of searching for food in restaurant dumpsters, water in public taps, and shelter in abandoned places. Weeks turned into months, and the woman established a routine of regular visits to the boy. She brought nutritious food, clean clothes, and medicine for his persistent cough, but realized that she needed to do much more than sporadic charity. The child deserved a dignified life, with education, health, and true love. Determined to formalize her help, she sought information about adoption from the competent authorities. The bureaucracy proved to be a complex maze of documents, interviews, home visits, and endless deadlines. The process could take more than a year, and there were no guarantees of approval, especially considering that she was single and had an intense professional schedule due to her multiple investments and businesses. While navigating this mountain of paperwork, a new problem arose. The restaurant owner had discovered that she was still in the area and began to spread malicious rumors about her intentions. He told anyone who would listen that the rich madam was using that street urchin to improve her public image, probably planning some publicity stunt for her businesses. Local merchants, already influenced by the history of favors that the restaurant provided through its political connections, began to treat the businesswoman with coldness and distrust. Some went so far as to refuse to sell her anything, claiming that they didn't want to get involved with people who take advantage of the misery of others to promote themselves. The situation worsened when social welfare institutions in the area began to openly question her intentions. Social workers appeared at the place where the boy lived, asking leading questions that suggested that someone had made accusations against her. The questions revolved around possible exploitation of the child's image, questioning about her true motives, and suggestions that her wealth made her suspicious of having ulterior motives. The boy, realizing the growing hostility around his protector, began to blame himself for the problems she faced. In his conversations, he demonstrated a disturbing maturity by suggesting that perhaps it would be better for her to distance herself from him, so as not to have any more complications. His sad little eyes reflected the resignation of someone who had learned too early that his existence brought problems for the people who tried to help him. The businesswoman, however, was more determined than ever. Each obstacle only strengthened her resolve to prove that there were people genuinely interested in doing good without expecting anything in return. She knew she needed a more elaborate strategy to face the web of corruption and prejudice that had formed against her, but she still couldn't imagine that the coming months would bring challenges far greater than anything she had ever faced. Determined to combat the rumors and prove her true intentions, the millionaire made a decision that would completely change the course of events. With part of her accumulated dividends over the years, she decided to rent a small abandoned property in the same neighborhood where the boy lived, transforming it into a community center that would offer free meals and literacy classes for children and adults in the area. The building she chose had been an old bakery, closed for 3 years due to the economic downturn that hit many small businesses. Its peeling walls and dusty windows told the story of shattered dreams, but she saw an opportunity for rebirth there. For 2 weeks, she worked tirelessly on the renovation, hiring local builders, painters, and electricians, boosting the local economy in a direct and transparent way. The first days of the center's operation were timid. Only a few curious children appeared, attracted by the smell of hot soup and fresh bread coming from the small makeshift kitchen. The orphan boy was among them, still hesitant, but visibly moved to see that his protector had created a safe place where he could eat without feeling ashamed or afraid of being kicked out. Gradually, more people began to frequent the place. Single mothers who worked as day laborers and had nowhere to leave their children during the day found a safe haven there. Retired seniors who lived alone discovered a place to socialize and feel useful, helping with activities and sharing stories with the children. Unemployed young people began to attend literacy classes, dreaming of better opportunities in the future. But the prosperity of the community center did not go unnoticed by the envious eyes of the restaurant owner. He watched with growing irritation how that woman was gaining respect and admiration in the community, something that contrasted drastically with his own reputation as a cruel and greedy man. His business continued to suffer the consequences of his bad reputation, and her constant presence in the area served as a daily reminder of his humiliation. The first sabotage attempt happened on a Tuesday morning. The businesswoman arrived at the center and found all the front windows broken, shards of glass scattered on the floor, and a threatening message scrawled on the main wall. "Rich people aren't welcome here." The material damage was the least of the problems. Seeing the fear in the eyes of the children who arrived for breakfast broke her heart. Without being intimidated, she called a glazier and had the wall repainted, but the attacks became systematic. The following week, someone cut the wires of the electrical installation overnight, leaving the center in the dark and making it impossible to prepare meals. A few days later, they found garbage dumped at the front door and offensive graffiti on the side walls of the building. What hurt the most was seeing how these acts of vandalism affected the people who depended on the center. Several volunteers, simple women from the community who had offered to help in the kitchen and in the classes, began to show fear of continuing to collaborate. One of them, a 60-year-old woman who prepared the best vegetable soup in the area, confessed through tears that she had received anonymous threats by phone, warning her to stop helping that intruder. The problems were not limited only to physical vandalism. The businesswoman discovered that someone had spread lies about the origin of the food she distributed, suggesting that the food was spoiled or contaminated. Some parents, influenced by these malicious rumors, forbade their children from attending the place, depriving them of nutritious meals and the opportunity to learn to read and write. The situation became even more complicated when she began to face problems in her own businesses. Important clients of her companies began to cancel contracts, alleging ethical issues related to her activities in the community. Someone had spread distorted versions of her story, painting her as a person who exploited poverty to gain positive publicity and increase her profits. Her investments in the stock market also began to come under pressure. Unfounded rumors about alleged financial problems in her companies caused some stocks to plummet, causing considerable losses in her assets. She suspected that someone with connections in the financial market was deliberately spreading false information to harm her economically. The orphan boy, realizing the growing pressure on his protector, made a decision that devastated her. One morning she arrived at the center and didn't find him in his usual spot. She looked for him for hours, until she discovered that he had returned to his old hideout in the back of the mechanic shop. When she finally found him, his little eyes were red from crying so much. "I only brought problems for you," the boy murmured, avoiding her gaze. "Everyone is talking bad about you because of me. It's better if you forget I exist." The businesswoman felt her heart break to see how that innocent child blamed himself for the malicious acts of cruel adults. She knelt in front of the boy and gently held his dirty little hands, promising that she would never abandon him, no matter how many obstacles they tried to put in her way. But the problems were far from over. The following week, she received a court summons. The restaurant owner had filed a lawsuit against her, alleging defamation and financial losses related to the day she had bought all his stock and distributed it on the street. The legal document was full of unfounded accusations, but she knew that she would have to spend considerable time and money to defend herself. Other merchants in the area, influenced by the constant lies and the pressure from the restaurant, also began to turn against her. A petition circulated through the neighborhood, asking her to close the community center and stop disturbing the peace of the community. Many signatures were collected, mainly from people who didn't even know her work, but who had been convinced by the distorted versions of the facts. The last straw came when city officials appeared at the community center with a temporary restraining order. They alleged irregularities in the operating permit and problems in the documentation, bureaucratic issues that she knew had been fabricated to harm her. The same corrupt system that protected the questionable practices of the restaurant was now being used against her charitable activities. Seeing the center being sealed off and the children who depended on the meals being sent away, the businesswoman felt for the first time since the beginning of this journey that perhaps she was fighting a battle impossible to win. The orphan boy watched the scene from afar, his silent tears reflecting the pain of seeing yet another safe place being taken from his life. That night, alone in her luxurious apartment, the millionaire questioned whether her efforts were worth it. Her businesses were suffering, her reputation was being destroyed by lies, and the people she was trying to help were paying the price of her obstinacy. But when she looked out the window and saw the lights of the city, she remembered all the children who had smiled for the first time in months during the meals at the center, and she knew that she couldn't give up. What she didn't imagine was that the worst was yet to come, and that the coming events would test her determination in ways she had never imagined possible. Determined not to be defeated by adversity, the businesswoman decided to face the situation head-on. While her lawyers worked to resolve the bureaucratic issues of the community center, she continued to distribute food independently, using her own home as a base of operations. Each morning, she prepared dozens of lunchboxes in her spacious kitchen and went out into the streets to find the people who needed help. The orphan boy, initially reluctant to accept her help due to the problems he believed he was causing, gradually returned to trust her. The businesswoman had obtained a provisional temporary guardianship document, a first bureaucratic step that allowed her to officially care for the child, while the adoption process followed its slow course through the judicial system. During these months of struggle, something unexpected began to happen. People who had been discreetly benefited by her actions began to observe with growing attention how she was treated by the community. A single mother who worked as a cleaner in commercial buildings had seen her 4-year-old daughter learn to read thanks to the classes at the center. A retired senior who lived alone had found purpose helping in the distribution of food. Unemployed young people who attended the educational activities began to get jobs thanks to the basic knowledge they acquired. These people, who had remained silent during the most intense attacks for fear of retaliation, began to organize discreetly. They knew the difference between the distorted version of the facts that circulated through the rumors and the reality that they had experienced personally. The positive transformation in their lives was concrete proof of the businesswoman's true intentions. The decisive turning point came on an especially tense afternoon. The restaurant owner, frustrated by the millionaire's persistent resistance and the continued decline in his clientele, decided to resort to more extreme measures. He gathered a group of allied merchants and some acquaintances of dubious reputation, planning a direct confrontation that would force her to abandon the area definitively. The group surrounded her on a busy street while she was walking with the orphan boy after a visit to the courthouse to follow the progress of the adoption process. There were 8 men, all visibly angry and determined to intimidate her through shouts, shoves, and veiled threats. The restaurant leader stood right in front of her, his face red with anger, as he screamed accusations and insults. "It's time for you to learn that you're not welcome here, rich madam," he shouted, pointing his finger at her face. "You destroyed my business, spread lies about me, and now you're going to pay for it." The boy hid behind her, trembling with fear as he saw so many angry adults shouting at the same time. Other passers-by stopped to watch the scene, some filming with cell phones, but no one dared to intervene in the face of the group's aggression. The businesswoman remained calm, but her heart raced as she realized that the situation could get completely out of control. It was at that moment that something extraordinary happened. From alleys, shops, and nearby houses, dozens of people she recognized from the community center began to emerge. The single mother cleaner appeared with other parents of benefited children. The retired senior arrived, supported by young people who had learned to read in his classes. Smaller merchants who had been discreetly helped by her emerged from their establishments. In a matter of minutes, more than 50 people surrounded the scene, positioning themselves clearly on the side of the businesswoman. Their voices rose in unison, telling their own stories of transformation and defending the woman who had changed their lives for the better. The contrast was stark. On one side, a small group of men shouting empty accusations. On the other, dozens of people speaking with genuine emotion about real help received. Among the people who appeared to defend her was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, who introduced himself as a health inspector. He had been discreetly investigating the complaints against the restaurant for several months, disguised as a regular customer. His regular visits to the establishment had documented an impressive series of violations. Improperly stored food, a kitchen with poor hygiene conditions, employees working without protective equipment, and practices that put public health at risk. "Mr. Owner," the inspector said in a firm voice, showing his official identification, "I have enough documentation here to shut down your establishment immediately. The irregularities I witnessed personally are serious enough to result in heavy fines and possible permanent closure." The restaurant owner paled instantly. His arrogance dissolved like smoke when he realized that his questionable practices had finally been discovered by someone with real authority to do something about it. The men who accompanied him began to move away discreetly, not wanting to be associated with the legal problems that were about to begin. Another unexpected ally presented himself at that moment. A human rights lawyer who had followed the whole situation through reports from clients and acquaintances. He offered to represent the businesswoman free of charge in all legal proceedings, explaining that cases like hers were exactly the kind of injustice that motivated him to work in his profession. "I have experience fighting persecution based on social and economic prejudice," the lawyer explained. "What they did to you is a pattern I see frequently. Well-intentioned people being attacked by those who feel threatened by the possibility of positive change." In the months that followed, the situation was completely reversed. Official investigations revealed that the restaurant owner had been under investigation by the IRS for years for tax evasion. His attempts to harm the businesswoman only accelerated processes that were already underway, resulting in substantial fines and the obligation to regularize years of fraudulent returns. The community center was reopened after the resolution of all the bureaucratic issues, which turned out to have been artificially created through corrupt political influence. An internal investigation at City Hall identified officials who had been bribed to create unnecessary obstacles, resulting in dismissals and administrative proceedings. The real transformation came when the entire community embraced the businesswoman's project. Honest merchants who had remained neutral during the conflicts began to collaborate actively, offering discounts on products for the center, donating equipment, and even creating an informal support network for families in need. The adoption process of the orphan boy was finally approved in an emotional hearing, where dozens of people from the community appeared as character witnesses, reporting how they had seen the child's development under the millionaire's care. The judge, impressed with the volume of support and the evidence of positive change in the boy's life, approved the adoption with praise for the dedication shown by the new mother. A year after the first encounter at the restaurant, the transformation was complete and impressive. The boy who once begged for dirty water on the streets now attended a private school, had completely recovered from malnutrition, and demonstrated a brilliant intelligence that had been stifled by misery. His constant smile and his insatiable curiosity showed how a child can flourish when he receives love and adequate opportunities. The community center had become a model of success, serving more than 200 people regularly and serving as an example for similar initiatives in other neighborhoods of the city. The businesswoman had discovered a new passion in her life, balancing her financial investments with social investments that generated dividends in the form of transformed lives. The old restaurant, after undergoing a complete change of management and adaptation to sanitary standards, was transformed into a branch of the community center, offering vocational courses and entrepreneurship workshops for young people in the area. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. The place that once symbolized cruelty and prejudice now represented hope and opportunity. In the quiet nights, when she put the boy to sleep in his colorful room full of books, the businesswoman reflected on how a simple decision to confront injustice had changed not only 2 lives, but an entire community. She had learned that true wealth is not measured only in financial assets, but in the ability to transform suffering into hope, create bridges where walls existed, and prove that human kindness can overcome any adversity when sustained by determination and collective support.